I want to continue this discussion because there's something that I think is really endemic to this issue, and it's this idea of free speech. And it's not so much, what I want to ask you about is not so much sort of the government constraint that the First Amendment creates, though it does, and that's very valid, but the culture of free speech.
Yeah.
And this idea that we as Americans, this is sort of one of the most bedrock aspects of the American idea, is that I get to say what I think, and I'm not going to be punished for that, generally speaking. So I want to ask you, how would you characterize sort of the health of our free speech culture today?
I think we're going through a process of maybe returning to the health of free speech. So I keep saying the thing that unites us as Americans is our Constitution and the values that we hold. We believe that we should be able to speak our minds and worship freely and petition our government for redress. That's all in the First Amendment. But we also believe that there are consequences for the things we do. And we've been all over the place recently with this. You know, we talk a lot about cancel culture. What does cancel culture mean? It kind of means you got kicked out of society because you said the wrong thing or did the wrong thing. And I think for a while on the right, it felt like we were getting canceled. And now people on the left are saying they're getting canceled. And we're going to have to come to some sort of a stasis here where we recognize that just because you have the right to say things doesn't always mean it's the right thing to do. So sometimes saying something horrible is just not the right move. And what's happening right now is that people's employers are saying that awful thing you said isn't in keeping with our values, and so we're not going to continue to employ you. And is that the same thing as cancel culture, or is that just a private company exercising their right as a private company to employ people who reflect their values? It's going to be interesting over the next little while watching how courts handle this, but especially how the public handles it. I do think we just need a higher tolerance for disagreement. And I know even the word tolerance has been used now in a way that sounds squishy, but we just have to be able to take some disagreement. We have to be able to hear people say things we disagree with and breathe through the pain and engage with them. But also, in a society where you have rights and freedoms, it has to be coupled with responsibilities. And so if you say something that looks like it's inviting violence or encouraging violence, there probably should be a backlash of some sort. And right now we're grappling with what that should be. I personally think that having companies say to their employees, the things you say reflect on us and that doesn't reflect our values, is okay. Obviously, the government can't silence your speech, but I also think it's okay if you're going to go say something inflammatory for other people to respond to that and say, that's not okay. And what I've seen, especially in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk shooting, is a lot of grappling with that. So if somebody says something that sounds like they think that he had it coming, which I abhor, I think that's terrible. But if somebody says something like that, and then other people say, that's terrible, you shouldn't say it, is that cancel culture, or is that society holding its own responsible? If we're all going to live peaceably together, we have to be able to say things to each other like, you're out of line, that was inappropriate. And we've kind of lost the tolerance for that too. We act like if I say something and you tell me it was inappropriate, you don't believe in free speech. But you also have a right to free speech. You have a right to disagree with what I said. So we just have to accept that if I'm out saying what I think, you are also going to be able to say what you think, and we are going to disagree sometimes, and that's fine.
I want to toss out this idea and get your response to it. And it's this term I remember in probably political science classes of the Overton window. And any of our political theorists or philosophers watching this can correct me. I'm sure there are much more articulate ways to share this principle. But kind of this idea that within this realm, they're kind of within the Overton window, so to speak, there are things that are fully appropriate to discuss and have disagreements on, and it's all within kind of the range of, okay, well, this is appropriate, you might be right or wrong, but these are kind of the rules of the game. Nothing in here is out of bounds. And this idea that anything outside the Overton window is just too egregious, too terrible, that it's not sort of just said in polite company in terms of disagreements. That is the kind of thing that is truly immoral or evil or destructive for those kinds of things. And just from my perception, and correct me if you think otherwise, it seems that as a society, there are various factions on both sides that have basically narrowed that significantly, saying that, one side might say, well, all of these positions on policy or politics or culture or morality are now outside the Overton window. So this other side that's saying these things, it's not just that they're wrong, it's that they're evil.
Yeah.
And then that side is saying the same thing about the other side. And so it seems that we need to allow more things, and appropriately, it is a balance question to your point. We need to allow more of these weighty issues that we debate as a society back into this sort of, you're in bounds if you're disagreeing about these things, that's okay, but certain things are still off limits.
Yeah.
Is that right? Or are we sort of out of balance?
I do think we're out of balance. I also think we've created this alternative reality where there are two different Overton windows. There's the in-person Overton window, which is very narrow now. And then there's the online Overton window, which is very, very broad, and it should probably be the other way around. If one of them is to be larger than the other, the in-person one should probably be larger. Because if you and I are sitting here face to face and we're having a conversation about a really tough issue, we can see each other's humanity. I can see the way you react if I say something that's overly harsh or that went too far. But if I'm at home typing and I'm like, bam, hit send, that's going to teach them. I don't see anyone's reaction. I may see their replies, but it's not the same thing as talking to another human and reading their body language and having to sit here and own my part in causing that reaction. So what we probably need, and it's not an enforceable thing, it's just something that we would have to choose to do as a society, is to narrow the Overton window online and not behave in ways online that are unnecessarily hurtful or harsh, and have more of the tough conversations in person. Broaden that Overton window and talk about politics, religion, policy. Those are the things we need to practice talking about in person. Talking about them online is generally not productive in my experience. People who go online to vent rarely change anyone's mind, rarely are open to having their own mind changed. Where if I'm venting to you in person, you might be able to point out something I haven't thought of and change my opinion at least slightly. I've never seen it happen online. I don't know if you have.
Well, I think maybe one thing to articulate is that if any of us are sort of ranting or venting online, and maybe I'll offer this as just a rule of thumb, that if you're getting on your keyboard, I guess probably our phones more often than not now, and you're just saying, well, like you said, I'm going to teach them. I'm going to say this thing, and it's going to make a point, and they're going to correct their ways. If it feels good for you while you're doing that, you feel, then you're probably doing the wrong thing, because it's not going to feel good for them, and you're not going to persuade anybody doing that.
No. As someone who's in a very public position now, I've never seen a hateful comment online that says, something awful about me or my mama or my morality, and thought, they probably have a good point. Maybe I should change my position. I have, though, had conversations face to face where I've had that, and even over the phone. Like, there have been times that somebody sent a letter to my office about something, and I've picked up the phone and called them back instead of sending them a letter back. And as I've talked through where they're coming from, I may not agree with some of the angry things they say in the initial letter, but I may see where there's something that I can help them with, even if we don't totally agree. And that is a very different outcome for me, and I hope for them, than them sending an angry letter and me sending a letter back that they don't think addresses all of, the points that they thought they had owned me on. And when you're talking to someone in person, it's harder to try to own them. You really have to engage with them. It's a very different thing.
Congresswoman, we have just a minute or two left before we go to a break, and to folks watching, it might sound a little bit like, well, these aren't hard policy ideas. What are you guys talking about? But I think that what we're talking about here is sort of the infrastructure that we need in order to have the really real policy debates. And what I want to ask you about before we go to the break is, if there's somebody watching or listening to this, whether they're a young person in particular, just because there's a lot of evidence showing that young people are so disillusioned with politics and public policy and civic engagement, but I mean anyone on kind of wherever they are on the age spectrum, if they're hearing this conversation, and I can just imagine folks might be thinking one of two things, and I want to ask you to give some advice to them depending on which bucket they fall into. If they think, number one, the other side is just so bad or so wrong, or they believe in such terrible things, I can't do this with them.
Yeah.
What do you say to that person? And then the second question, if I can get both in real quick, the second question is if they look at all this and say, I'm just going to pull back and disengage. I just can't engage at all anymore. I just don't care.
Yeah.
What do you say to those folks?
So you will not be surprised to hear that I talk to a lot of folks that have both of those reactions, and I think they are two sides of the same coin. Both of them are ways of disengaging. And I think the first type of person you talked about, the one who's like, the other side is so bad, I just can't do this. I don't think they think of themselves as disengaging, but if you're only talking to people who agree with you, you're not sharpening your own opinions. If you're not being challenged, it's like anything else. If you lift weights, your muscles get stronger. If you sit around telling yourself how strong you are, you're not getting stronger. And so if you're willing to engage with people who disagree with you, your opinions will get more honed, and you may prove yourself right, but you will still be engaging in a way that's healthy. If you say politics is gross, I don't want to be part of it, it's the same problem. Now you're sitting at home from the gym. Maybe you're not telling yourself you're getting stronger, but you're also not getting stronger. And if we are to exist in a society together, we have to have these engagements, or our society gets sick. So both of those reactions are inappropriate reactions, but they probably seem unrelated to the people who are having those two reactions.
Thanks for watching that clip of Defending Ideas. For the full conversation, click the link in the description and make sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your shows.